This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of DocNJock, episode 499. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Looking forward to this broadcast. We're going to talk about a lot of good things. Detroit Red Wings making noise finally after the All-Star break, playing at a level that can make people pay attention. Looking forward to breaking it down with my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Second half of the podcast, got to talk about all the rumors, all the speculation, all the recruiting going on from the Lions players trying to get their team better. It's great, man. It's a great time to talk sports, post-Super Bowl. NFL, there's always things to talk about. You got NFL players ripping on Detroit. You got fans going online and ripping NFL players. It's a great time. But we've got to start with the Detroit Red Wings. And I think it's great that Dylan Larkin, in my mind, I think he heard all the speculation, kind of has been reading between the tea leaves, kind of maybe seeing online that some people, some podcasts maybe even saying he's not worth it. Post All-Star break, dude's been putting the puck in the net, playing at a better level, and now you see the Red Wings kind of being in the conversation for that final playoff spot. And it's been nice to check in with the Red Wings. And at first, prior to the March 3rd deadline, I would have said, look, maybe this is a year in which you're willing to take a step back, maybe sell, maybe move on from a Verana, maybe move on from a Tyler Bertuzzi. But then they go on a win streak before their loss to the Kraken, putting the puck in the net, better goaltending. Everything just looked drastically better for the Red Wings, so it puts things in a different light. So I'm curious, just based on what you saw with this Red Wings team, maybe just a little bit before the break and now post-All-Star break, you could also now fairly make the argument this hockey club could benefit from one or two additions to the roster that potentially could give them that final push to make the postseason and maybe even make a little noise in that first round.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird. You start putting up some wins, you start stringing a couple games together. Next thing you know, you're making the rundown, and we'll talk about you. It's good to be able to talk hockey finally. It's good to feel like this team's in contention. This team has a shot at legitimately making the playoffs, and I think you're right. Adding a piece here or there could really help bolster this lineup, could really help put this team over the top and really help it make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. And it's been nice to see kind of what they did going into the All-Star break and then immediately coming out of the All-Star break, stringing some wins together and looking like a team that's hungry, a team that's driven, a team that can feel it, that feels almost like they're on the precipice of doing something great. Now, the thing about all of this is whether they're going to be buyers or they're going to be sellers with the trade deadline coming up, is it feels almost like it's a year early, which is a little bit dangerous because if you go in and you're going to go grab a couple of guys, you're going to mortgage parts of your future for now, you got to make sure that you make some noise. You got to make sure that you hit. You can't push in too soon because it could really damage the rebuild. And that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm a little bit cautious with this because, like I said, I do feel like it's just a season too soon. And I know it sounds weird to say that because we've been waiting how long? 8-10 years for the Red Wings to be relevant? And here they are on the verge of being playoff relevant. And I'm saying, wait, hold on. Maybe let's just take a breath here. Maybe let's just kind of hold on one quick second and breathe and make sure that this team is actually legit, which I think is nice. I think this next week is going to tell you everything you need to know about where this season's going to go, what Steve Yzerman is going to do, and the direction this team is going to take. If this team can come out and they can reel off a couple of wins before next Friday's trade deadline, I think this team is securely in hand to go out and make some moves at the trade deadline and bring a player or two in, bring in a top four defenseman, bring in a top two line forward, somebody who can help put the puck in the net. And maybe you keep a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi and you continue to keep this rebuild going with those pieces and make that push in the playoffs. But it is It's one of those things where I think if you are Steve Yzerman, you're excited. You're happy. This team's putting wins together. This team is working out kind of the way you had hoped, the way you had envisioned. But I would be a little bit nervous because it does feel like it might be just a season too soon. And again, you don't want to mortgage your future and completely swing and miss because, again, this team is about 4 or 5 points out of a playoff spot. This team does have a couple of games in hand, so they're kind of right there. But if this team goes on a little bit of a slide, all of a sudden you're going to be way out of contention, and you might not be able to make those games up. But I'm excited. This is one of the first times that we've been able to talk Red Wings. I know it's still really early in the year, but I mean, we're almost 2 full months in, and this feels like it's the first, maybe the second time we're talking Red Wings. Like, I don't even know. We don't talk Red Wings a whole lot, but this team is doing things, and they are looking like they are a team to be reckoned with, and that is absolutely awesome. Makes me excited.
So what's the fairest way to perceive Tyler Bertuzzi? Because I think some people would naturally have concerns regarding his injury past, sometimes just can't put together full seasons. You know, he's in the final year of his contract, and you're not hearing really a lot of talk about Steve Yzerman working on a new deal. It's tough, too, because you see the talent. You see the spark that player of that caliber can bring to a team. The problem is that he gets whacked and he's got all these nagging injuries that makes it so that his production gets derailed, and you can't give him 5 years and $5 million per season because of the fact you got to invest. And there's a cap where if you make a punitive mistake, you can't make a big mistake and give somebody a long-term contract and then they end up getting hurt. It's happened in the past, but it was less punitive. Now it's significantly punitive. So I'm just wondering, what's your thoughts on Tyler Bertuzzi? Because it would indicate if you are going to make a move, that would be the guy I think that might draw maybe a couple second rounders or some capital that Steve Yzerman, obviously you see now that he covets.
Yeah, and look, it's a tough decision because Tyler Bertuzzi is a guy. Look, I'm a huge fan of Tyler Bertuzzi. I love his game. I love what he brings to the table. He's a guy who goes out there. He's a bit of an agitator. He plays a little bit of a muck it up in the corners type of game, and he's able to score goals. This guy is able to have 30-goal seasons. He's a guy who's able to basically put up a point per game when healthy and when really feeling it. So what do you do with him? Because he has been hampered by injuries this year. He has been hurt. This team has been able to kind of do things without him because they've had to. And is he a guy who you can build around long term? Because, again, final year of his contract, there's not really been a lot of movement on what they're going to do as far as bringing him back. There's not really been a lot of back and forth with Tyler Bertuzzi's camp and the Red Wings camp as far as getting a contract done. So what do you do? And you're right. This is a guy who at the trade deadline you could move on from and you could get some stuff back in return, whether it be a couple of second-round picks, whether it be a future prospect, whether it be something that you can then add to the coffers to help build for that future. Again, remember what I said. This might be coming just a year sooner than maybe Steve Yzerman anticipated. And if that's the case, I think Tyler Bertuzzi is a guy that you do move on from, a guy that you do trade away. You do get some stuff back in return. Maybe you do get 1 second-round pick, and maybe you do get a future prospect, and you see kind of what happens there. But look, Tyler Bertuzzi is a guy who I would love to keep and build around because he does a lot of things that a lot of players do not like to do. He will battle you along the boards. He'll win the fight along the boards. He can score goals. I mean, we're not too far removed from him having a 30-goal campaign. I mean, that's crazy to say. This guy has 3 goals this season, but again, really been hampered by injuries this year. So he's a dude that I would love for this team to build around. When we've talked about him compared to Dylan Larkin, this is a guy who I've put over Dylan Larkin just because I like what his game is. I like what he does compared to what Dylan Larkin does. This guy is willing to go out there, throw the body around. He's willing out there to battle. This is a guy who is a top 6 forward, and he can really sit there and command your top line if you need him to. So he's a dude who I would love for them to build around. But I think what you're going to find out with Tyler Bertuzzi and what you're going to find out with the Red Wings is kind of what happens along this next 4-game stretch or so, because after these next 4 games, I could see him maybe being put off to the side and them not playing him and then trying to trade him, because if they lose the next 4 games, this team is definitely going to be in a sell mode, and Tyler Bertuzzi would be that piece that would fetch you the most, especially since he's last year of his contract. There's been really no movement there. This is a dude who can get you some stuff in return. But for me, I would love to build around him. I would love for him to stay. But again, you got to be able to find a contract that's going to make both sides happy. And I don't know if you can do that. That's kind of where we're at with Dylan Larkin right now. Dylan Larkin really feels his value is much higher than what the Red Wings feel his value is. So what's going to end up happening there? I think in the end, both guys want him to be here. Both sides want him to be here. I think something does get done. I think it's acceptable for both. But you also have to remember, with his pay increase, Bertuzzi's going to want a pay increase. Everybody's going to want a bit of a pay bump, and you don't have necessarily the cap space to do it. So Bertuzzi might be the odd man out here, which in my estimation is a little bit of a shame, because I really do like what he brings to the table.
Yeah, there are, looking here, a couple other unrestricted free agents you could potentially move, and looking at Pius Suter and Oscar Sundqvist, a couple of centers that seem to be affordable. Got a couple of restricted free agents. I think Joe Veleno potentially fits into what the Red Wings are doing. He's a restricted free agent after the season. You look at the goaltending situation, Magnus Hellberg, he'll be an unrestricted free agent after the conclusion of this year. But it'll be interesting to see how, because at this point you look at it, and the team that the Wings are playing this week, the Capitals, by the time this podcast comes out, the Wings will have skated up and matched up against the Capitals, which is always a good competitive game. I like to see, because that's a team that has always been solid and has been up there in the upper echelon, but they're kind of now also battling with the Wings. When you look at perception, it kind of looks like most people classically will put the Red Wings on the bubble, where you're not exactly sure if they're going to make the postseason, not exactly sure if they're going to turn the tide. They got a couple teams like the Islanders and the Capitals they got to kind of battle with, and maybe people that stack up the rosters potentially don't see the Wings being really up to snuff to make that push. So I think the consensus is that the Red Wings potentially will be sellers. So pay attention to that. I think that that's probably what will happen, like you've said, is that they're not just there yet. They still got a lot of young talent. There's still an infusion of talent. One more draft from Yzerman, and you'll start to see the expectations turn, where you're going to want to see this Red Wings team in the postseason and regularly compete. So far, you still can categorize this year for Lalonde as being solid. You start to see the identity of this team. And now by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have a look at least at Jacob Vrana, who will make his return since October 15th. And he's also an interesting case as well, in that he had some issues away from the ice that precluded him from contributing and doing some things. But the dude's got the natural goal-scoring talent that you always want to have and possess. So I want to see what he's going to be able to do. I think that Yzerman took a calculated gamble putting him on waivers, kind of knew that, okay, someone with his issues is probably not going to be scooped up. So now he's also had a resurgence down in Grand Rapids, so you want to see what he's able to do. I think Vrana coming back, if you can get anything out of him, if he can put the puck in the net, now you're talking about another situation in which you can ease up a little bit of pressure on Dylan Larkin in the goal-scoring front. So I definitely want to see what Vrana's up to.
And here's the thing, bringing Vrana back and Vrana contributing to this team, that's just like going out and basically making a move at the trade deadline, because you've got nothing out of him all year. So if he's able to come back, work his way back into the fold, and he's able to put points on the board, that is an offensive talent that you haven't had on this team since the beginning of the season. So that's just like going out, grabbing that impactful forward, grabbing that goal-scoring guy who you can lean on and put points on the board for you. And again, part of the reason why I say this next week is so important, if you look at the teams that the Wings are playing heading into the trade deadline, they're playing Washington they played Washington on Tuesday. That's a team in the playoffs. They're playing New York. That's a team that's currently in the playoffs. They're playing Tampa Bay. It's a team that's currently in the playoffs. They're playing Ottawa back-to-back nights next Monday, next Tuesday. That team is fighting with Detroit for that final wild card spot. That leads you up to Thursday, where they take on the Kraken, and Friday's the trade deadline. So these are all teams that are vying for either that wild card spot or looking to secure and lock up their playoff spot. So you've got teams that are basically seated in the playoffs right now that the Wings have to go up against. This week is going to tell you everything you need to know about your team, because if you can get some wins against a team like New York, Washington, Tampa Bay, you can split, or you can take both games from Ottawa. You're looking at a team that's going to really have a good command of what it's going to take to win in the playoffs. And that would give Steve Yzerman, I guess, the nod or the go-ahead to go out and bring in an additional player, go out and get a guy, make a couple of moves at the trade deadline, and really help bolster this roster. Now, if they start losing a couple of these games and they don't look good, they look a little bit soft, they look like they're in over their head, that tells Steve Yzerman everything he needs to know, and they're going to look to be sellers. And you could see moving on from guys who have one-year contracts, guys who are basically looking to re-up a guy like a Tyler Bertuzzi and move on from them and get some capital and possibly get some prospects in. So this week is really important for the Detroit Red Wings. So if you haven't been paying attention, I really feel like you need to start to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is the team that has generated some buzz, and that's good. You need to see a team that, at least when you look at the Pistons and Tigers, they're not anywhere near the postseason. The Lions are right there on the cusp, but any one or two injuries, and that can completely derail a season, and it's a violent sport. So the Red Wings are right there, I think, neck and neck, 1A, 1B, with the Lions in terms of confidence in the rebuild, getting players that fit. You have a head coach that aligns with the general manager, so it makes it so it's very interesting to watch now at this point, because now it's a playoff chase, and every game is important. You look across and you start to see what the Islanders and Capitals are doing. You get more invested, so absolutely. So for those that aren't, really paying close attention, how would you categorize and summarize where this rebuild is at right now, and what steps would need to be taken, probably if you wanted to fast forward to the offseason? What does Steve Yzerman still need to tinker with in order to get this Red Wings team right back on track? It feels like it's been slow and calculated, but it's been something where you're not seeing really drastic mistakes. You're not seeing really, obviously outside of the Larkin negotiation and kind of stalemate, you're still seeing a Red Wings team that's being built in the likeness in which you can compare to what the Tampa Bay Lightning did. And it seems favorable in regards to the fact that you're stockpiling a lot of young talent that people are going to be excited about in a season or two.
Yeah, I think if I was giving an estimation of where it was at right now, I would say it's ahead of schedule. I think what you're getting with the production that you're getting, I think the way this team is taken to the new coaching staff and a lot of the production that you're getting from some of your top lines, whether it be forwards or defensemen, I think you are ahead of the curve, which is good. If you're looking at really helping solidify this and really move this to the forefront and really get this team where we all want it to be, where it is basically penciled in as a playoff contender every single year, and it's a team that is going to be contending for a Stanley Cup, I still think you're a couple pieces away. I think you need one more top four defenseman, somebody who can score from the blue line, and I think you need to add one, maybe two more impactful forwards, somebody who can put the puck in the net and a guy who can go out there and is dangerous on a penalty kill. He can sit there, kill off the penalty kill. If there's a loose puck gets turned over, he can skate down and possibly deposit one. Really suck the wind out of the sails of whoever the team is that you're going up against. Goaltending wise, I really like what Ville Husso has done. I really feel as though he has secured that spot, like that is his net. But my concern is what happens after Ville Husso. Is Ville Husso the long-term solution? I don't necessarily think he is. I think Detroit has to figure out what's going to happen between the pipes. I think Ville Husso is an answer for right now and for next year and possibly the year after that. But after that, I'm not 100% sure what you're going to do as far as goaltending goes. I do feel like this team, like I said, is a few pieces away. I do feel like they are ahead of schedule, though, which is really nice. So I don't know if that's because of Derek Lalonde and the coaching staff and what they've implemented, or if it's more on the players being put in positions where they're able to succeed and they're taking to the coaching, or if it's just the fact that Ville Husso has really secured secured what's going on between the pipes there and has taken over that goaltending position. But again, I do have question marks on where his future is and what the future of that position is on this team. So a couple more pieces. They're a few pieces away, but I think if you are a Detroit Red Wings fan, the future is very bright. You can be excited. It's weird because it really felt as though, say, a couple of months ago, everybody was really questioning what we're doing with Steve Yzerman. Like, is his plan actually working out? Are things going accordingly? Are we where we really need to be? Like, can we take a look at the timeline and see kind of where we're supposed to be, and are we there? And I think right now, if you look at everything, you're on schedule. You're maybe a little bit ahead of schedule, and that's a very good thing. So I think this team is in a really good spot right now.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I think that the Little Caesars Arena will provide an opportunity for the Red Wings to get a lot of support, to get that final push, to at least get into the bubble area, to get into the conversation, keep people interested at least into March. And we'll check back in as well, obviously, next week, looking at the rumors, what's going on, who potentially the Wings could add, and we'll look at and see, kind of discuss a little bit about the Red Wings' future, because it's going to be bright. It's going to be. You just feel it. It's just that right when you get to that position, you realize it takes time, and Steve Yzerman's been given the exact, been given time, been given the formula. He knows what he's doing, and I think that at this point in time, the biggest question mark is going to be in regards to Dylan Larkin. How long, the investment, are they going to budge? Who wins the negotiation? What ends up happening? Does Steve Yzerman pull the trigger on a major blockbuster that could set the Wings back a little bit this year, but maybe even sets them on the path for success for the next decade? So it'll be a big 7 days here upcoming. And stay with Detroit Sports Podcast. Hit us up. Let us know what you think. Is there a player out there that you see skating around that's doing some things that you need to talk about? Is the goaltending situation up to par? What do you think of the coaching? What do you think of the defense? It's all on the table. We love talking puck here at Detroit Sports Podcast. Even though we don't talk about it quite as much as the other topics, we definitely are paying attention. We're in the know. Adam is among one of the most dialed-in supporters of the Detroit Red Wings. Hit us up at Detroit Podcast. Let us know what you think. What do you think about the Red Wings, man? It's going to be interesting, because I do think that behind the Lions, they're the team that's going to be right there on the cusp of having success and maybe even having a playoff series win way before we all expected. So it's going to be interesting to see. And now, real quick.
What do you think happens if next season you don't have a guy like Dylan Larkin or Tyler Bertuzzi, if you don't have both those guys? Because for the longest time, those two guys have really been the core of this team. If for some reason you can't work something out with Dylan Larkin and he ends up moving on, going someplace else, and Tyler Bertuzzi either gets traded away or same deal, can't come to terms for a contract, anything long-term, and Tyler Bertuzzi's out of the picture. How do you think that impacts this rebuild? Do you think that gives Steve Yzerman the ability to kind of be like, all right, cool, we can go out, we can re-sign another top-tier forward or two? Or do you think it maybe puts things back a little bit and you're trying to bring in different guys to kind of fill multiple roles here, and you're just kind of trying to almost nickel and dime it and hoping that you one of these nickels and dimes turns into a quarter for you?
See, for me, if that happens, it would kind of signal to me that maybe the shift is going away a little bit from some offensive production and going toward more of a defensive team. So I would then start to maybe change what kind of talent I would think they'd bring in, because you're giving away a big chunk of your scoring and some physicality and some toughness. So you obviously would indicate then, okay, you got a lot of nice, solid young defenders, and you got, defensemen that can do some things, but you need some scoring. And that's really in the way in which the NHL you've seen now, a lot of games go over 5 goals combined. So in the end, I know it's scuttlebutt. I know it's a stalemate right now. I don't see it happening. I think that you want to covet players like Bertuzzi and Dylan Larkin. I think that in the end, the numbers will match up and they'll make it happen, especially with the contributions on the ice, what they do in the community. It would send a really bad signal. I just think the optics would look real bad if you get a homegrown guy in Dylan Larkin who's among and one of the most respected dudes in the league, and he goes out and he gets taken away from the team that he grew up with, the only team he wants to play for. I just think that might send a really might make some other NHLers kind of take a look at Yzerman in a weird way. So I don't see it. I don't see that happening. I for some reason, $500K doesn't seem like a big number to potentially not be able to finagle and make it happen, even if it's 8.3, 8.4, or something like that. I think that I would be shocked if Yzerman doesn't budge a little bit, maybe up to 8.2, 8.3 more years. And for Dylan Larkin, I mean, come on, what's the big difference between $8 and $8.5 million? Just take the offer and get security, and you can get endorsements. I mean, my goodness, you don't think you can make $1 million a year, make that up in a couple Little Caesars commercials? Come on. So I feel like the negotiation will potentially happen and take place, and they'll get it done. I would be floored if by the time the deadline comes and rolls past, if Dylan Larkin's not on this Red Wings team. I would be shocked if a blockbuster deal was put together. I think that he's part of the future. I think that he is part of the framework, and I think he's entering his prime, so you got to have a guy like that. You're looking for goal scorers and a dude that can score consistently around 20 goals, 25 goals, that can even get a little better in the system. When you surround him with talent, I think will be part of the Wings' future. But for a long time, I think Wings and Lions, baby, those are the two that you can put faith in that, okay, management looks like they got their shit together. Looks like there's going to be reason for optimism. And when have you seen other NFL teams start to copy the Lions? I mean, you got an NFL team in Carolina. We got to turn our attention, put them in the crosshairs. Those motherfuckers are taking our coaches. They're doing something where you're looking at them and going, wait a minute. Hiring ex-NFLers to start to coach and broadcasters and taking people from the Lions organizations past, taking current coaches, 2 of them, and starting your business there. What the hell, Carolina? I can't wait for next year's home game against the Panthers. I think the Lions are going to put up hurting because of what they did to the Lions on the road, really set forth a pathway to kind of, expose the Lions' warts in terms of their lack of ability to stop the run. And now you take Deuce Staley, Todd Wash. I think the Todd Wash departure, a little more impactful than Deuce Staley because there was some talent at running back, and you have an offensive coach and you have an offensive coordinator that's well-respected. Todd Wash was a former defensive coordinator, and you saw with some tinkering what he was able to do with James Houston. Aiden Hutchinson got on the board with 9.5 sacks in his rookie season. Those fuckers at Carolina are trying to copy the Lions.
And not just the Panthers, but I also think the Colts, and I think this is going to be a new wave that you're going to see heading into the league. And I think it all really starts with Dan Campbell's lead here. I think if you watch what's going on in the NFL right now, just look at the landscape, look at these new coaching staffs and how they're being constructed. They're being put together with more and more players, more and more first-year head coaches, or more and more first-year coaches that are basically coming from the players' ranks. And I think a big reason for that is you have guys who are realizing what Dan Campbell did. Dan Campbell came in and was like, we need instant credibility. And what buys you credibility with your players more than other players? Guys who have recently been there, guys who have done it, and guys who have done it at the highest level. You look at the Panthers coaching staff. They just brought in D'Angelo Hall, Sean Jefferson, Deuce Staley, you mentioned, Josh McCown, Todd Walsh. These are all guys who were recently in the league. These are all guys who have played at the highest level. These are all guys who garner a ton of respect. You look at the Colts, Bubba Patrone, Cato June, Mike Mitchell, Reggie Wayne. These are, again, all guys who have done it at a very high level and done it for multiple years in the league. And you're seeing that these coaching staffs are being filled out by former players who are, like I said, first, second time going around the coaching tree. And I think it's a great thing. I think what you had here in Detroit, I think it spoke volumes to the league. And this is, I think, maybe the first time we can say that we've got a legit organization. We've got a legit coaching staff. We've got a legit coach who has a coaching tree. Deuce Staley, Todd Walsh, those guys are all coming from the Dan Campbell coaching tree. When can you say that anybody from a Detroit Lion coaching tree went anywhere else in the league? You can't. This is the first time. This is awesome. I think what Dan Campbell did, maybe unbeknownst to him, but it worked, was going out, grabbing these dudes who connected with the players, get the players to buy in. Once the players buy in, they start to perform. Once they start to perform, you can sit there and start to add new things in. You can really start to develop a culture, and you can really start to develop your playbook, and you can really start to help wins take precedence here. And I think that's what Dan Campbell did here. I think that's what Frank Wright's going to do with Carolina, and I think that's what's going to happen with the Indianapolis Colts as well, as they're adding these players into the mix. These guys who are well respected, not just across the league, but with the current core of that team. They're respecting these guys who are coming in and coaching them. They're going to listen to them, and again, it helps build that culture, helps build that precedence of winning. And I think it's important. I think this is the first time we can say that we've got a coaching staff and we've got a front office that is absolutely legit. And I think a lot of it comes from what we're seeing across the NFL landscape right now, as far as these coaching staffs are being constructed. I thought it was really, really interesting, because this is something that you've seen a lot with the Carolina Panthers, and it's kind of what piqued my interest and made me scratch my head and say, hold on a second, there might be something here. You've seen the Carolina Panthers come and just start picking apart parts of the Detroit Lions coaching staff. And then you do a little bit of a deeper dive and you look at other teams and how they're constructing their coaching staffs. And you see it with the Colts, who are basically chock full of new head coaches and guys who are going at this for the very first time that were former players. And I think this is the direction the NFL is going to end up going. I think this is the direction that they're headed in, because, again, it's just a way for instant credibility. It's a way for these guys to connect with the players. And once the players buy in, that's when your whole culture can start to build. And that's the one thing that we've seen here in Detroit. In the course of basically 2 years, we've had a complete flip of culture. And now it's expected that the Detroit Lions go and win games. And I think a lot of it has to do with how the coaching staff was put together. I think it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love the fact that the Lions are at the forefront of being talked about as, hey, that's a team that went out and got a player-friendly coach. And I think the tough part is that you realize that you get a lot of credibility if you're an NFL coach that's played before. A lot of the guys will give you that extra juice knowing that, hey, we can go talk to you about, hey, taking a day off or having – I mean, you remember when we did podcasts and I would say, man, these guys go Monday, Tuesday off basically, and then Wednesday's a light walkthrough. That goes as a tremendous benefit to the players when you ask them to go all out on Sunday. Whereas Matt Patricia was just like ragging on these guys in practice and really hyper focused and trying to do the most with the practice time that he had. And there's that fine balance, because it did cause problems for the Lions. They didn't get crisp, and then Dan Campbell would have to crack the whip a little bit more. And really, it's a fine balance, because the union has set forth, kind of more restrictions where you don't really get a lot of opportunity to practice a whole heck of a lot during the season. It's more mental. It's more looking at film and being prepared by the time you get to Sunday. So to get the players, the extra edge that an NFL team gets is through having the motivation and buying into what a coach does. That little extra can be the difference in the fourth quarter, and the Lions got it. And when you now match talent, when you give Dan Campbell 2 more first-round picks, 5 more picks in the first 85, you're talking about a situation here where your window is nice and open, cool breeze coming in, and you're going to have opportunities to make some noise. And I like to see other teams doing the same kind of things. And you see it. Frank Reich, former player, Deuce Staley now going to be part of that staff. You got Jim Caldwell going over there. So you're looking at Carolina, and you're like, okay, let's see if you can match some of the player evaluation that Brad Holmes did, because Brad Holmes got a lot of credit for what he was able to do in his first 2 drafts. And now for the Lions, the next step is, and I love it, is that we can actually dig deep. We can actually sit down and explore, as we've done at All Lions and here on the podcast. We can explore the free agents, who should be picked up, who should be looked at, who's a nice fit in free agency, what area is affected in the draft, what area is affected and targeted in free agency. A couple big decisions. I can't wait to see how it shakes out. And we'll talk about it. How does Brad Holmes look at DJ Chark? Does he view him as just another piece to the puzzle that can be replaced in the draft cheaply? Or does he make the kind of chemistry move and say, look, man, this guy, when he was on the field, he was a gateway for us to have explosive plays. And him alongside Jameson Williams can provide a 1-2 combination there that gives you the deep threat that makes Jared Goff look better. I think the Lions are worse without DJ Chark, but I think another team could easily drop $11 million deal. It could be the Vikings. It could be a team in your own division that looks to hurt you. So I can't wait to see it. So I'm wondering, when you look at free agency, do you think that because Brad Holmes has said, look, we're going to use a conservative approach, a lot of short-term deals. We're going to maybe look at our own free agents and still call them, look, acquisitions because they're open to everybody. I don't see them going after Deron Payne. While I would love them to go after some big-name splashes, I don't see that. I see the biggest splash probably being DJ Chark. If he can get 2 years, $20 million from the Lions, I think he might consider staying. So that name is going to be very interesting, along with what the value they find to be Jamal Williams, because you realize the dude come off a good season, but again, he's not the number one prototypical superstar back. He got the benefit of playing for the Lions and their offensive line. So those two decisions, I think, are super, super key. But outside the lines, I'm curious to think, is there a name that you think could be targeted by the Lions that could be mid-range, like a Bills Tremaine Edmonds, but that's going to cost you $10 million? I just think there's a lot of players out there they could target with ties to the Saints, but I see a lot of commitment to players that are already here on the Lions.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of the similar approach, right? It's going to be going through the list, bringing back a lot of your old guys, a lot of your own guys that kind of, what they bring to the culture of this team. Look, we talked about culture in the last little segment that we had, and I think the culture has changed. But the thing is, I don't think we're so far removed away from that old culture. I mean, you kind of touched on it when you were highlighting what we're going to talk about in this show. You have a guy like Micah Parsons going out and basically shitting all over the Detroit Lions, basically saying nobody's going from LA to Detroit. Well, we're not so far removed from the old culture that was here. We're not so far removed where other players around the league still don't look at Detroit as a garbage can. So I think bringing back some of your own players, bringing back some of the guys who helped establish that culture, I think it goes a little bit of a long way, because it's you know what you're going to get from them. You know the buy-in. You know how they're going to help contribute to basically solidifying that culture. Now, I think a guy like DJ Chark, I think he is a prime candidate to come back. I think he's a prime candidate to get, like you said, a 2-year, $20 million deal, maybe a 3-year, $30 million deal. If I would bring DJ Chark back, because you've seen when he was healthy, you've seen what that offense could do. You've seen that offense had another gear that it could get to. And it was awesome to watch the production that came from Jared Goff, that came from DJ Chark, that came from other aspects of the offense. It was great. So you bring him back, they have that chemistry. And Jared Goff really does seem like he's a guy who he has to have chemistry with you in order for the offense to work and for him to trust you and for him to want to throw you the ball. So they have that already ingrained. You bring him back, you give him a deal. I would make his deal to sit there and try to counter some of the higher deals, like you were saying. Maybe Minnesota offers a deal where it averages $12 million a season. I would really tie it to DJ Chark's health and to his production. Really make it incentive laden, where hey, if you can play 15 games this year, here's another $1 million. If you have, whatever his receptions were last year, if he can basically double what his receptions were last year, here's another $500,000. If you can score 7 touchdowns, here's another $1 million. Just add these incentives, stuff that doesn't necessarily kill your cap, but makes the player want to go out there and perform even more. I would layer that into his contract, and I would do something like a 3-year, $30 million on average contract. Now, I don't know if they go out and they bring in that big name free agent. I don't know if they go and do that. I think this is the year where you might see Brad Holmes go out and maybe shake the tree a little bit. Maybe he doesn't go out and bring in multiple big name splash free agents, but he might bring one in. He might bring a guy. Maybe I don't think he brings 2 guys in, because I think he's, again, trying to build a lot of this through the draft. I think he's a really draft forward kind of guy. So what I could see happen is him going out, and you brought up Deron Payne. I would love for him to bring Deron Payne in. That'd be great. But I don't know if that's going to be the case. I could see him doing something along these lines. And you tell me where you're kind of at. Obviously, cornerback's going to be an issue that needs to be addressed, and I believe we both believe linebacker is a position that needs to be addressed as well. I think maybe he goes out during free agency and he addresses one of these two positions with a bigger name free agents. If you only had one that you could sign, you could only sign one big name free agent, one cornerback, one linebacker. Which position would you choose? Would it be cornerback or would it be linebacker?
It would be cornerback for sure because
Cornerback?
Defensive back. You need upgraded talent. Here's the problem. Very rarely does a young rookie come in and just play exceptionally well. There's only so many Sauce Gardners out there in the world. I would look at James Bradbury and see what you can get potentially for him because he was a ball hawk, and I think he might be hungry. One of those guys that wants to right the ship of fucking up hugely in front of the national audience there. I think you got a lot of good potential in a guy like that. I don't see the biggest splash, which was great because we'll talk about it, in that Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is what's so great, too. Just a quick sidebar. Amon-Ra St. Brown, guys, you know what he does? He takes the cash and he does a podcast with his brother from a great network called the 33rd Team. And all they do is, and that's what these networks do, is they start up and they get their resources and then they allocate it and say, oh, why do we have our homegrown guys? We can go get guys and splash the cash to the athletes themselves. Look at Michael Brockers. He spent the Super Bowl week kind of getting his feet wet writing. And it was so good to read what he wrote. He said, man, I was floored to get some of these kind of canned answers that I used to give. And he's like, man, it gave me a different appreciation for the work the media and writers have to do to try and elicit good responses. And it was like, yeah, exactly. It's not that easy to stick a microphone in someone's face that you know is trying to not give away some trade secrets. So it was good for him to see that. And for Amon-Ra St. Brown, that dude is a walking soundbite. So I'm like, darn it. Now I got to allocate another 30 minutes to another podcast. I'm up to 20 different podcasts. I'm trying to keep up and I'm way behind. But Amon-Ra St. Brown's podcast is great because he talks shit with his brother. It's Inside Scoop. And he comes out and he's like, yo, Jalen Ramsey, I want to call you up. Come to Detroit. Our stock is on the rise. I'm like, shit, that's a story. So I got to write that. And then you get the response, which is great. Nowadays, more athletes are getting online. So Jalen Ramsey responds, and he's like, well, you know, I can't comment on it too much, but we'll see. But he takes a great look at it, and he's all into it, so it's exciting. And then you get Micah Parsons, who's now looking on social media, scrolling, and he's all like, what the hell? Ain't nobody kind of going to want to go to Detroit from L.A., and that sparks a huge debate. So the blessing of having Dan Campbell letting his guys have personality and letting them do podcasts is there's a lot more insight into the fact that I love it, whether it happens or not, because a lot of people would always tell us here at the podcast, why do you guys always look to free agents? Why do you guys write so many podcasts and talk about and explore so many free agents on your shows and things like that? Well, one, because the team wasn't a playoff team, and two, you know that general managers are doing those things in regards to kind of giving you inside scoop as to how to build a team. And guys, you guys like that kind of stuff. It's the top stuff that draws attention to the podcast. When we post those kind of things, they get commented on. When we write those things, people read it. So it was great to see Amon-Ra St. Brown do a podcast and to be open and willing to talk about different things. And now, too, to get the inside scoop, he'll just go and get some of the players to talk about things. So it was great. I don't see the Lions doing it because it costs a shit ton of money. It's going to cost you $17 million potentially for Jalen Ramsey, and that basically would be it. It'd be Jalen Ramsey, and that's it. It would preclude you from getting anybody else.
See, that's why I would do it a little bit different. I wouldn't go cornerback because the price attached to cornerbacks is so much steeper than it would be for a linebacker.
Yeah.
And I would go the linebacker route because, look, you got to replace Alex Anzalone. Early in the year, Alex Anzalone was a bit of a problem. He was a bit of a lightning rod, bagged on him quite a bit. Towards the end of the year, really turned it around, became quite steadfast for this team. And there's a reason that Alex Anzalone was brought into this team. There was a reason why Alex Anzalone was part of the roster here. Again, you had a coach in Dan Campbell who had experience with him. Dan Campbell knew what he was going to get out of him. Dan Campbell knew he had to put him in the right spots to make the right plays. I would upgrade that position, though. And I would upgrade that position with a guy like Levante David. You could probably get Levante David. Again, he's on the backside of his career, so you're not signing him to a huge long-term contract. Probably be something along the lines of 3 years. You could probably get him anywhere from 3 years, $30 million, maybe 3 years, $36 million, and that's kind of where I would put it at. and you get Levante David, you get that experience, you get this guy who is well respected around the league. You bring him here, you put him in the middle, and you let him basically be your lead defenseman who just basically communicates with everybody else, gets everybody else in position, and you let him kind of do his thing. Again, not going to break the bank. Yeah, he's an older player, but he's a veteran player. He's a guy who can really take some of these guys under his wing and really help coach them up. On top of that, he's a well-respected dude in the room. If he comes in and he can buy into what the philosophy is here, that goes a huge way in really solidifying and cementing that culture. And that's why I would go linebacker. I'd go Levante David. If you're looking to do something a little bit cheaper, maybe you can go Devin Bush. For some reason, it really didn't work out in Pittsburgh with Devin Bush.
Right.
I think he's a young guy, young talent. You could possibly go get him. I would love Tremaine Edmonds, but I think Tremaine Edmonds is going to cost a little bit of money. That's why I kind of stayed away from Tremaine Edmonds. I would love for him to come here though, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, same range though, 12, 13 million a year. So it's expensive, but he's only like 24, 25 years old. So that gives you an advantage. Yeah. I agree. I just don't see them maybe even making a splash of somebody costing an annual salary of $10 million or more coming into the Lions. I think that they want to build to the draft. But here's the thing that stinks. Could you imagine if the Lions make the postseason, they get to 10 wins next year, and you get to the playoffs, and you got a young cornerback, and you got Jerry Jacobs, a rookie, and Jeff Okudah? It just doesn't breed a lot of confidence, because I think any experienced offensive coordinator is going to look at that, and they're going to test that kid right away. By that time, hopefully they develop, and working with Dre Bly and Brian Duker and Aaron Glenn, hopefully we'll get them to that point. And another year of the secondary with the safeties being better and the defensive line getting better, more pressure. But I think the position at linebacker, you can kind of ease into a situation. I know Alex Anzalone's not the best player in the world, but if he's willing to take another year deal, he's a guy that understands the defense. You can kind of work around it. The defense did get better. If you guys look, the second half of the year, the defense did do a lot better with Anzalone, and they kind of figured it out when they got healthy, and they added another pass rusher. So I think when you add an interior member, an interior defensive lineman via the draft, potentially, a Jalen Carter or Miles Murphy or Tyree Wilson or whoever it is that they end up getting, when you add that thumper to the middle and you now have Houston and Hutchinson coming in from the edges trying to wreak havoc, that makes defensive backs a little bit better and maybe take a chance in the draft. But, man, it's just tough either way, because you just need a good player. You need that defense to step up. That's the biggest key. That's why you're seeing a lot of mock drafts that we'll talk about kind of have the Lions look at the position at defense with both picks. So I'm curious to see. I definitely in the draft, cuz would love it if maybe this year, if you're going to be a little bit aggressive, is take one of those second-round picks and a second-round pick next year. Move back in and take 3 first-round picks this year. Try to find all 3 positions, cornerback, linebacker, interior defensive line, all in the same year, and see if somebody can potentially be somebody that you can target, be aggressive, or maybe you take 2 defenders and an offensive player. Maybe get back in for Bijan Robinson, because that dude is balling. I don't care what any of you guys say. You go watch the tape of that guy run. That guy has the it factor. I want him on the Lions. I would love that. I don't care what any of you guys say. I liked it. I talked about it a month ago. I would like him. He's one of my draft crushes, my early first draft crushes, along with obviously some of the defensive players. And in future weeks, we'll talk about that. But Bijan Robinson is appealing when you want to hand the ball off and you want that hard 3rd and 3 and you want that guy to power through. That guy's going to be awesome, and he's going to do the good thing. But right now, until we see it, it's pretty much straightforward that we need to see what level of investment the Lions are going to make. But the first moves are going to be great. In that, you guys remember, when you look at the cap, right now it's about $16 million in funds, but they're going to add easily another 20 by cutting probably Romeo Okwara and Michael Brockers. That gives you another $20 million. And then when you guys know that the cap is fixed and things like that, there's ways to extend it out where the average year is pushed back a couple years. So as long as you keep kicking the can and you're reasonable, you can pretty much get a guy that's going to be your target. The Lions are in a good spot where if they fall in love with a guy, they can make the offer. And I love the fact that the Lions fans are crushing on Micah Parsons. Look, Detroit is a destination. It's a spot now It's fun. It's great. And the tax advantages are way better than California. That's for sure. California take 60% of your money right off the top. Here in Detroit, you can do a charity and get some money back and do your thing. And it's a fan base that loves football. And you got Ben Johnson coming out and saying, look, man, I was in Ford Field at a concert, a country concert, and people were just loving life and having a good time. And he's like, I want to feel this. Yes, when you're in Ford Field and the Lions are playing good ball, there's no better place in Detroit to be at, and everybody knows it. So now it's finally the time, man, because next week, by the time we record, the Combine will be kicking off. The Underwear Olympics are already around the corner. You get no break. It's already right now mock draft season to draft prospects galore, and everybody's kind of honing in on the cornerbacks and interior defensive linemen. You found a mock draft that maybe caught your attention that you didn't like? I like a lot of them. There's some wild-ass ones out there where they got the Lions kind of moving around, trying to get to, making 50 trades, trying to get to number one and shit like that. But there's some fun ones. But, guys, stick to the big dogs. Stick to Sports Illustrated, ESPN, Draft Network. Those guys put out really good ones as well. Don't go... Listen, there's a different breed. Don't go to the ones where they just go to the mock machine and just type in names and wing it. Go to the established leaders. You'll get a good sense. Earlier this week, a decent one, not his best. My one that caught my attention was Daniel Jeremiah. I always check out his because he was a former NFL scout. He has the Lions taking, obviously, an interior defensive lineman. I believe it's Miles Murphy. And then he's got Anthony Richardson at 18, the quarterback. And it's great, but in his second go-around, we did that mock draft back in November. So it's not that intriguing to me. You caught wind of one maybe that it didn't catch your eye in the right way. Which one was it?
Yeah, I didn't like this one at all. This was by this was from CBS.com. It was by Ryan Wilson.
Yep, he does a lot.
I'm not a huge fan of it. And look, I do a ton of my own mock drafts. I go to the draft simulators and I do a ton of things. And a lot of times when I'm in my draft simulators, I'm able to, with the Lions, with that 6th pick, I'm usually able to trade back once, sometimes twice, pick up a lot of draft capital, which is a lot of fun to do. I don't know if it's going to actually play out that way. I try to do it as realistically as possible. So it's just a little bit more fun for me just to kind of see what the Lions will be faced with on draft night. But this draft kicks off with Will Anderson going number 1 to Chicago. Bryce Young goes number 2 to Houston. Jalen Carter goes number 3 to Arizona. So the two big defensive players are already off the board. Then you've got C.J. Stroud going number 4. This is where it gets interesting, though. Tyree Wilson, the edge out of Texas Tech, goes number 5 to Seattle. So that leaves another quarterback on the board.
Yes.
And there are a couple teams like Las Vegas, like Carolina, that are even if you want to trade back to 19, a team like Tampa Bay, who could be looking for a future quarterback with Will Levis still on the board. In this mock draft, it has Detroit staying put, taking Joey Porter Jr.
Oh.
I don't necessarily like that pick. I feel like at 6, Detroit could have probably traded back.
Yep.
Or what they could have done is they could have took the interior defensive lineman Miles Murphy out of Clemson. I would have preferred the trade back, but I think going 6 with Joey Porter Jr. A little bit high there. So then we kind of work our way back through this mock draft, and we start to approach 18. Now at pick 16, Devin Witherspoon, who's a guy who I'm pretty high on out of Illinois as a cornerback. He goes to Washington. Peter Sonorski, the offensive tackle, ends up going to Pittsburgh. So now Detroit is on the board at 18, and you've got Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Arkansas, available. You've got Brian Branch, the safety out of Alabama, available. You've got Deontay Banks, defensive back out of Maryland, available. You got Keely Ringo, cornerback out of Georgia, available. Luke Musgraves, if you're thinking offense. He's the tight end out of Oregon State. So you've got these guys available. Instead, what we have here is we've got Luca Van Ness, the edge, out of Iowa going to Detroit. And this is what he writes. Van Ness never started a game at Iowa, but that's not the point. The point is the NFL teams love his size, his athleticism, and where his game could be in a couple of years from now. Purdue's George Karlaftis went at the very end of round 1 a year ago, and USC's Drake Jackson went a round later. Both players were very high upside prospects who exceeded expectations as rookies. Van Ness is in the same conversation, but could be the best of the bunch. So you're going to basically take a flyer at 18 on a guy who has high upside. So again, hate this. Probably would have went with Drew Sanders, the linebacker out of Arkansas myself. You'd have secured your linebacking spot, grabbing the what is projected to be the first linebacker in the group, in the bunch. So I probably would have went that direction. And then we go to the second round. Second round with the Lions. It doesn't get too much better here. So second round for the Lions, you've got guys like Antonio Jackson, safety. You've got Brian Brisset, defensive lineman, available. You've got Darnell Washington, tight end from Georgia, available. You've got Jadavius Martin, cornerback out of Illinois, available. So you've got some guys that are available. You got Byron Young, defensive lineman out of Alabama, available. Instead, what he has the Lions doing here at pick 48 is he goes Rashawn Johnson, running back out of Texas. So he takes a running back in the second round. This was super irritating to me. I was not a huge fan of this draft. I did not like what I seen here. I just felt like there were a lot of wasted picks, and you were taking flyers on guys that I don't know why you would necessarily take flyers on guys. You're not in a position where you're just throwing darts at a board hoping guys hit. So I thought this mock draft really pissed me off. If they take a running back in the second round, it better be they better not take a running back in the second round.
Yeah, you can get value in later rounds. See, and the good thing is, and it's funny when you look at it, CBS does a lot of them. So a lot of them end up being like the same and similar styles, just rotating. Like you could have Miles Murphy at 6 or 18, and then Devin Witherspoon at 6 or 18, and just interchange it. You get 2 mock drafts right there. So CBS is great in that they do so many that one is among the ones that if you come across it, you're going to be like, what the hell? And it's so different, but when you got to put them out every day, it's sometimes not even close to being realistic. So I think the ones that obviously you're starting to see, and it's good in that you're starting to see the big boards, is Devin Witherspoon. If he's there, is probably going to be a Lion because you have familiarity. You got ball hawking Kirby Joseph from Illinois. They obviously trust what can happen, what's going on with the coaching staff at Illinois in the Big Ten. They like that. I think also as well, obviously one of the interior defensive linemen is going to be in play for sure. Miles Murphy, Brian Brisset, somebody that's going to be a big, huge clog, somebody that's going to take up and be a solid, depth player along that defensive line to help out Aiden and James Houston. I do think that the edges probably are not going to be in play if you really look at it deeply because, how are you going to take snaps away from James Houston? You figure to get him more in the coming years. So I think it's going to be more of a guy that you're going to plug into the interior of the defensive line. I don't see quarterback at this point in the first round. I don't see that. They could take a splash, but I know that there's patience involved, and that could also signal more patience if you do look at it. Anthony Richardson, but I think you can get one of those quarterbacks later that you can develop and not give up an investment. I think that if you're starting to turn the corner and you can have that debate of, hey, we can get a guy that plays on the field now. Why would you not take advantage of that? Get a quarterback like a Duggan and stick him and get him in the 4th and 5th round and see what happens. Maybe a Clayton Tune, somebody that you respect later on in the draft. A Jake Hayner, for example. I don't think you need an Anthony Richardson. You have your guy. You're building your offense around Jared Goff. So while I would do it differently, I would make moves, make splashes, look around for some of the other guys. Knowing what you know, it would indicate that the drafting of a quarterback would probably be later on in the draft. So Anthony Richardson, when you see those in the first round, those are probably from people not exactly in touch or don't want to believe that Jared Goff's the guy. Guys, Jared Goff's the guy. He's firmly in the club. He's in the club, in the penthouse. He's in the VIP. He's right next to the guys. So he's being involved. He's asked about, he's in the mix. Ben Johnson wants to work with Jared Goff. So you're not going to have a guy that's going to stand there that potentially is going to take his job right away. You're going to have a developmental guy. So you don't take developmental guys, that you're going to sit that high in the draft. So it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be fun to see how the Lions turn it around. Yeah, you picked one that would piss everybody off. Ooh, CBS Sports. Yeah. That's a tough one. So yeah, definitely.
If the Lions were to do that, I swear to God, it would just lose my mind.
That would be tough. Yeah, this week, definitely. Do another one. Thursday, Friday, and take a screenshot of the Draft Network one. Let's see. It's good to evaluate. I always love looking at those. And maybe do one this week and next week. Next week, the one you do with trades. Do the trade down first. So, yeah, definitely look for Adams on Twitter, at AdamRSGROZ. Put some up there. It's fun. we always get to debate, and you're in the mix as well to give your opinion on who you would take, and it's always fun banter. And guys, for those of you that don't like mock draft and draft season, I'm sorry, man. You're missing out. There's so much good discussion, so much good back and forth respectfully on how to build a team, on what the team needs. It's so fun. If you're missing out, if you're not willing to take the investment and be like, listen, if someone says they want to put a quarterback, yeah, it might be wrong, but it's definitely worth the debate. It's fun to talk about. It's the best time of the year. It's roster construction season. And you got the combine next week where the Lions are going to be definitely a team that's going to be looking at a lot of defensive players and players that could help this team. Man, take advantage. Don't be stubborn. Get in the mix and soak up all the draft coverage. Don't be someone that has to wait until August until you get back to OTAs and training camp before you get back into football. It's 365, baby, and Detroit Sports Podcast and all lines are going to be there breaking it all down. Make sure you follow Adam as well on Twitter at AdamRStroz as he breaks everything down as well too, man. It's a fun time. So, man, that hour flew by. These last couple recordings we've done, we fire up the machine, hit the record button, and our allotted hour just flies by. But in the good realm of things, this week is good as we approach episode 500. We talked about the two teams that are poised to have big success in the coming years, the Red Wings and the Lions. And what better way than to fire up the old recorder and talk about Detroit sports with the two best teams with the most juice. For the Jock, Adam Strozinski, I'm the Doc, John Macaroon. Episode 499 in the books, in the can. Podcasting time's over. Cuz, let's get back at it next week for a marquee episode.